Alrighty. So this is kind of one of them fuck it moments where I've had a decent amount to drink today. And then I learned that the Russians are bailing out the Cypriots. Oh, fine and good. But when it comes down to it, it's because there's a lot of Russian money sitting in Cypriot banks. And that taking a 10% hit on that money would hurt the poor people trying to stash their money in Cyprus. It's as if the U.S. went and bailed out the Cayman Islands or Switzerland. Not that Switzerland has a problem, but you see what I mean. It very clearly underlines something. My inclinations are fairly liberal, to tell you the truth, in a lot of ways. I look and I say, oh man, how can we let people, starve on our streets? How can we have people standing there with cardboard signs saying, please help me, I'm a veteran, and I can't get a job? Because we've really done a terrible job in so many ways at preparing our working class to compete in the world economy. We've shipped jobs to other countries while making huge profits for the Mitt Romneys and the people who stand to gain from, say, Republican policies, one might say. But to tell you the truth, Democratic policies are just as shithole. I mean, yeah, let's help the Solyndras of the world or whatever. But I have to say, overall, the Republicans tend to piss me off a little more on this, which is why whatever wrath I have tends to be directed towards them more, simply because they seem, maybe they just have a worse PR machine, but they really do seem to only care for that top crust, right? But here we see that at the most extreme level in Putin's Russia. Oh my, I'm going to lose lots and lots of money. President Putin, can't you use our poor people's money to save me my millions of rubles? Yeah. Throughout history, it's always been this terrible dichotomy between, okay, we don't want to let the influences, the powerful, to get too powerful, whether it's control over government or not. But the thing is, when it comes to letting them run free, the laissez-faire idea, what created the Gilded Age, and what largely has created our current income disparity, they end up owning the government. And they end up making the rules in such a way that they will perpetuate their ownership until such a time as the populace gets so fucking fed up that they just say, eat the rich. Because it's got to come to that eventually. It's come to that eventually in every society. Now the wise men, the wise haves in our society, the Franklin Delano Roosevelts, cursed be their names in the mouths of Republicans, have seen well enough and said, let's buy off the poor. But that's not really any better when it comes down to it. And of course the solution, the communism, for example, that turns out just as hellish. Worse, because not only is it unfair and unbalanced, but it just don't work. Nobody has the incentive to do better. But striking that balance, there was this, at various times in history, not just American history, at various times there's been this ideal of, okay, we try to help the small entrepreneur, we try to help the small farmer, we try to help the landholder, there are going to be some who are going to be better in any society, who are going to be better off, who are going to have more power. But if we can limit that power significantly, if we can keep anyone from getting truly obscene amounts of power, then things won't be quite as bad. That's the best we can hope for. Not quite as bad. Unless humanity just changes. And that was kind of the, the precept behind communism, right? We will have this great catastrophe of a command economy because we will make it so that man is better. Well, that doesn't seem to work, does it? Now, there may be soft ways. Man, I think, is better, is more compassionate, largely. I'm going to speak about powerful man. Maybe the point is, because what I was going to say is more compassionate than, say, in the Dark Ages or in the Roman era. But, to tell you the truth, I don't think that's really the case. I don't think human nature's changed that much. I think what happens is we have this sort of pattern, right? When enough people get powerful enough that they can impose their will on others, they do so. And the question is, how do you create the community? Because when you get little towns, when you get people who care about each other, when you get people in a disaster type situation, not like New Orleans, but anywhere else in the world, damn near, when you get people who do have a sense of community with one another, and it ain't just New Orleans. I mean, our suburbs with people hiding behind their fences and in their little air-conditioned coffins, avoiding one another completely. You don't have it. But when you have a real community, when you have people who do come together with a common goal, a common purpose, a common existence, then you do see some kind of nice things. For example, I remember in one of the big snowstorms in Buffalo, everybody helping one another out. And the same, it looks like, was happening during Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy, or whatever they want to call it. In most cases, people do tend to come together under those circumstances. But the thing is, how do you kind of create a society that is held together in that way, that is that fundamentally strong? Do you need absolute disaster threatened it all the time? I mean, you had that certainly in colonial days, right? Them damn Indians are going to come in and they're going to scalp us. Yeah, well, you taught them that. I don't know. I really don't know. But I can tell you that concentration of power is terrible. Whether it's concentration in Washington or concentration at a smaller, more local level. The key here is to make sure to create institutions that essentially prevent power from coalescing. Because it's better to not be able to really make these great 5-year plans, or whatever they are, these great initiatives, and allow communities to kind of organically operate, than it is to allow anyone, and I don't care who they are, Pullman with his cities, or towns or whatever, or other earlier feudal overlords, or the government itself. Anytime you start concentrating power too much, it's a terrible thing. And it's kind of one of the magical things that in the very early days of the United States Constitution, certainly before the Civil War, but maybe well before, you saw this kind of chaos. And you saw this kind of chaos in, say, Poland, where it didn't work anymore because, just like with the Articles of the Confederation, it was too limited. Power was too restricted. There were too many checks preventing any activity. But there's a balance that has to be made where some positive action has to be allowed, but it has to be a lot more limited than I think we've ever seen under the United States Constitution, to tell you the truth. I mean, from the very earliest days, there was nepotism and patronage, power politics being played with positions, etc., at a very broad and strong level. But the Articles of Confederation were a little too weak. And I'm looking to, well, certainly the United States has become more and more a centralization of power, and after the Civil War it became terrible. But let's look back to the moment before, not the Constitutional Convention. I think the deals that were cut there created a little too much power in the long run, or the potential for power. I mean, that's one of the problems. If you look at the Roman Republic, too, there was a lot of checks and balances, but they got thrown away. It's okay if a consul repeats. It's okay, you know, if we elect a dictator for life. As you start doing those things, as you start pushing aside the controls, there's a problem. So how do you make controls so strong that they last forever, but not so strong that they prevent any forward movement? And that's the real challenge. I think the United States failed nearly from day one. Nearly from day one. I mean, in the sense of from the Constitution. But likewise, the Articles of Confederation were. So the question now comes to, and it may not be an American question, it may be a question for some other country. It could be Iceland, it could be Taiwan, it could be anybody. At what level, at what weaker level do you prevent this concentration of power that we're all subject to so far, without weakening the country so much that it cannot be effective? I don't know. Just some thoughts for the day.